Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled to have you here today. If you're someone who just loves to learn and really craves that structured, visual understanding of things, you are absolutely in the right place. Because today, we're going on this really unique curator's tour through the visual language of devotion. We're going to impartially explore how artists, theologians, and even just the natural world around us have historically provided a canvas to express these incredibly complex, intangible beliefs. It's going to be fascinating. So, think about this for a second. How do you capture the infinite, the divine, in a single static image? It's kind of the ultimate artistic and intellectual puzzle, right? Well, today we are going to decode exactly how art, sacred objects, and even the vast landscapes of nature have been used to represent profound theological concepts. We'll trace the visual strategies used to literally make the unseen seen. Here's our roadmap for the tour today. We'll start with Mary, the flawless foundation, then Christ's earthly journey. Next up, symbols of the sacred, followed by devotion to the divine will, and finally, we'll wrap up with reflections in creation. All right, section 1, Mary, the flawless foundation. Okay, let's dive right in and look at how visual purity is used to represent spiritual perfection. Just look at the classical depiction here for the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. Notice those incredibly soft, ethereal colors and her calm, solemn expression. The artist has deliberately removed any visual noise. No harsh lines, no heavy shadows. It's almost like an early version of Photoshop, right? Just smoothing everything out to convey this absolutely pristine state. This total lack of visual blemish is the artist's clever way of communicating a theological lack of sin. It is just a beautifully flawless depiction. To really ground this artwork in historical context, we have to look at the actual texts that inspired it. St. Ephrem put it perfectly when he wrote, "Thou alone and thy mother are in all things fair. There is no flaw in thee, and no stain in thy mother." What we just saw in that painting is the literal visual translation of this exact quote. The words say no stain, and the artist uses a perfectly blended, stain-free palette to make that concept a tangible visual reality. Hit the nail right on the head. Now, what's really interesting about what we're looking at here is the explicit use of visual hierarchy. This stark black and white artwork, titled S. Maria Mediatrix, takes complex theology and organizes it into a straight vertical line. Up at the top, you've got God the Father. Descending from him is Christ on the cross, and then, positioned directly beneath them with her arms wide open, is Mary, serving as the mediatrix, or the mediator. The complete lack of color here actually forces our eyes to read it almost like a theological flowchart, tracing that divine connection straight down to humanity. It really gives us a fantastic grounding. Moving right along to section 2, Christ's earthly journey. So now we're moving from foundational concepts into a visual narrative. To help us understand this narrative arc, we're going to look at classic iconography across a really clean, logical structure. We'll start at the beginning with the Annunciation, move through the intense struggle in the agony, and finally reach the triumphant climax in the resurrection. Here we have the very beginning of that earthly journey, the Annunciation. And you've got to notice the incredibly specific details the iconographer used here to tell the story. Look at the dynamic forward-stepping posture of the angel Gabriel on the left. His wings look like they're literally still in motion. That directly contrasts with Mary's total stillness and seated posture on the right. This stark difference between motion and stillness captures the exact precise moment the divine intersects with the earthly realm. Let's move to the next part of the story and see how this builds. As the narrative reaches the agony in the garden, the whole tone shifts. Look at the masterful, really dramatic use of light here. You have this single, powerful beam piercing through the darkness, filtering right through the gnarled, twisting branches of an ancient olive tree, and it beams directly onto the solitary kneeling figure. The artist is using this stark contrast between the heavy, earthly struggle of that rugged landscape and the ethereal, untouchable light to represent divine presence right in the middle of deep human suffering. And finally, we arrive at the resurrection, where the artist relies on the sharpest contrast yet. Over on the left, seated by the stone tomb, there's a figure cloaked in heavy, dark blue fabrics, hunched all the way over in mourning. But immediately behind her, standing tall, is the risen Christ. He's draped in radiant white garments, stepping effortlessly out of the shadow and into the light. The visual weight of the entire piece lifts completely from left to right, mirroring that massive narrative leap from death to life. The way these artists manipulated light and posture is just brilliant. But art doesn't only focus on figures. Which brings us to section 3, symbols of the secret.
Okay, look at these two completely different visual approaches to Eucharistic adoration. On the left, we've got this wide, grand shot capturing the monstrance perfectly centered on an altar, framed by sweeping church architecture and gorgeous stained glass. It is all about grandeur and public veneration. But on the right, we get an incredibly intimate, close-up view of a gold chalice and the host. Here the focus isn't the room at all, it's the highly textured, embossed details of the gold itself. One perspective pulls you way back to show scale, while the other pulls you right in to show precious intimacy. And here is exactly where these concepts synthesize just beautifully. This artwork combines both the sacred figure and the sacred object. We see Jesus, and visually pouring directly from him are these massive, vibrant rays of red and pale light, representing divine mercy. But notice where they're pointing. They cascade down to entirely envelop the monstrance below. The artist created a literal visual bridge between the abstract theological concept of mercy and the physical object of devotion. Absolutely fascinating.
All right, Section 4, Devotion to the Divine Will. Now let's look at how metaphors written in texts are actually translated into physical visual realities. Take a look at this glowing, intensely warm heart imagery. The text accompanying the great return of the divine will reads, I love you, like water for each seed, growing fruits of love and light where heaven and earth are wed. I mean, it's a beautiful, deeply poetic metaphor. But how on earth do you translate a sweeping, poetic metaphor like that into something visual? Well, this brilliantly illustrates the point. The source material takes that exact written metaphor, like water for each seed, and pairs it with this absolutely stunning photograph of a vibrant, rushing river cutting right through the rocks and a deep green forest. The theological text about life-giving grace suddenly becomes instantly understandable because we're looking at the most life-giving force in nature. And the visual payoff continues right here. The text promised growing fruits of love and light, and boom, we are presented with this incredibly vibrant cluster of blooming flowers. The deep magentas, the bright pinks, the crisp whites. This isn't just a pretty picture. In this context, it serves as the visual climax of the textual metaphor we just read. The abstract concept of spiritual growth is totally grounded in the literal growth of a garden. And honestly, that transition from text to nature brings us perfectly to our final and most expansive topic.
Section 5, Reflections in Creation.
Look at this sweeping aerial photography. It is literally breathtaking. You have this vast, winding coastline and the deep, endless blues of the ocean stretching out as far as the eye can see. Historically, human beings have always used the sheer, infinite scale of the ocean to mirror spiritual awe. When words fail to capture the size of the divine, well, we turn a camera to the horizon. Think about the last time you stood at the edge of the ocean, that innate, overwhelming sense of smallness you felt. That is exactly what this imagery captures. And as we look a little closer at these waters, we see this pristine, perfectly clear turquoise. It actually echoes the very first themes we explored today. Do you remember the flawless, stain-free artwork of Mary from our first section? That exact same visual language of purity and unblemished perfection is found right here in the crystal-clear shallows of the natural world. So the crucial point we're getting at is that nature provides a complete vocabulary for these concepts. Look at this towering, massive rock formation. It's standing completely resolute against the crashing ocean waves as the sun sets behind it. This imagery visually communicates enduring strength, eternity, and something completely immovable amidst the changing tides. These are all core theological tenets, expressed purely through landscape. Let's just let this linger for a moment. A golden sun sinking over endless, shimmering water. It really is a breathtaking visual climax to our gallery tour today. It seamlessly blends light, vastness, and overwhelming beauty. It's pretty much the ultimate visual representation of something far, far greater than ourselves. Which leaves us with this final, really important thought to ponder. How does the natural world around you mirror the concepts of faith we've explored today? We've seen how painters, iconographers, and photographers use color, light, and scale to literally make the infinite visible. Next time you see a brilliantly clear sky or a dramatic shaft of light breaking through the trees, ask yourself what it might be trying to explain. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep looking closely, and I will see you next time.